On today's episode of Emotionally Me, I want to talk to you about the topic of getting the right diagnosis. Okay, things that help me feel and be seen, understood, and heard. So let me give you some tips and explain why it is important to get the right diagnosis. Here at Mango Oranges, we cover all things about mental health, neurodiversity, being black. So also if you're PC, if you're queer, how all those different factors interplay, that's what we focus on this channel. So when we try to get a diagnosis, we face several obstacles. Some of the main ones are access, who can access that type of care, misdiagnosis, trust, and also staying on the ball. All of these are obstacles, but also things that can help and are important to know how to navigate in order to be successful at getting the right diagnosis, aka finding a clinician that truly is trying to understand you and assess you for the thing that you think you might have and most accurately give you a description of what that is. Why are diagnoses important? I think diagnoses are important because generally speaking, diagnoses are there for insurance companies. Also as well, yes, as for mental health professionals. But mostly my therapist always tells me that diagnoses are there for the insurance companies because they need to see, okay, this is an illness or this is what's wrong with you. Therefore, we give you money so you can get better and get back into functioning in this capitalist, really weird, effed up society really quickly. Diagnoses are useful to also getting an understanding of what type of treatment is needed for my condition. What is the support that I am eligible for, that I can find and seek out so I get the most accurate, I can get the best help possible. For me personally, diagnoses have always been a pretty important part of my life because one of my, I used to call it obsessions, but now I'd call it special interests, is everything about mental health and learning about different conditions. I have my own DSM-5 at home. Basically learning the whole diagnostic criteria, understanding what drives and keeps certain disorders alive, how to help, how to, like basically understanding also the deep psychological factors behind different disorders. That's one of my hyper focuses, mental health in general. Diagnosis for me have been always important too because it gives me a clear overview and see that there's so much research out there and so much knowledge about how my brain works or why I behave in the way how I behave and how I can get out of it, or also how it can get worse and how to avoid it. Like there's so many aspects to it that I find useful in diagnosis. But for me, mostly a thing has been understanding myself and also others. I started learning about it from such an early age because of my own struggles, I think, but also because I had really good friends who struggled with depression and with OCD and suicidal ideation. And I always wanted to know, how can I be there for you? How can I help you? What can I do to not lose you? Why are you feeling like this? I want to understand. So basically, that's where my whole thing started, about learning about most things, psychological disorders, mental disorders. The issue with diagnosis is that for most people on this planet, it is inaccessible. Unless you live in a country like Austria, where the general health insurance is very forthcoming and very trying to accommodate and basically pay for most things and not have super crazy waiting times, then you're one of the lucky ones, I'm telling you. I myself lived part of my life in the UK, and there I did experience a lot of obstacles regarding the NHS. And I'm not here to bash the NHS. I'm just here to say, UK government, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, I am not sure if they want to help anyone, to be honest, because why is the NHS so underfunded? Why? Why can nurses not go home and visit their families? UK government, tell me, please tell me. Actually, don't tell me, just fix it. It's really hard for most people to get access to qualified clinician, also specialist clinicians, because some conditions require specialists. I need to underline that because others won't be able to recognize your condition and maybe misdiagnose you, or not offer the appropriate help, or not understand and trigger you in ways and actually re-traumatize you in different ways through the therapeutic or clinical process. Access, funding, insurances, private health insurances, all of that, very important, but still such a messy topic because of how governments around the world deal with it. Second obstacle, misdiagnosis. I myself have a long experience and history of having several misdiagnoses in my life. The biggest part also major diagnoses that make me who I am, that I'm neurodivergent. I was like that before I was born. I was like that from the get-go. That fundamental part of my existence and how my brain functions differently to the general durchschnittliche and also the amount of support or non-support mostly I got throughout my academic career, school time, and still throughout my life. That has impacted me greatly. Regarding the topic misdiagnosis, I'm gonna make a separate video on. I'm gonna try to make a separate video on this. I promised myself not to make empty promises to you anymore, because I never know if I actually gonna be in the headspace and be able to do the thing. So I'm gonna try, guys. Why did I get those now? Because I fought a lot to get the actual help that I needed in those times, and now try to get all the things and funding and like support I can get just so I can function as a day-to-day human, as an adult in this society. There's so much overlap between different disorders, causes a lot of confusion amongst clinicians as well, especially to those who don't look closely enough. There's so many nuances. Being able to diagnose someone with the right diagnosis of what they actually have in a time frame of one session, whether it's 60 minutes or 90 minutes, is usually not enough time. Sometimes it's very clear and evident, but other times, especially with things like autism, that is severely underdiagnosed and just stays untreated in many girls and women, is really detrimental to many people's lives. Trust is also a big thing. If you didn't grow up in an environment where it was taught to you that you can trust clinicians, that you can trust therapists and psychiatrists and doctors, they do have, yes, certain Western approaches, usually Western, to treating different conditions. But if you weren't taught that this is someone who you can trust, that it's important to go to therapy, as it is important to go to the dentist for the hygiene, the yearly hygiene thing in the mouth, the checkups as well, then it's harder for people to even open up to those topics, especially when it was stigmatized, demonized, always kept as a big taboo topic that no one was really allowed or comfortable to talk about, which brings a lot of shame and a lot of internalizing and trying to fight with struggles that you have on your own, when in reality you do need support in order to be okay, in order to live the life that you might want to live, Another different obstacle that I wanted to cover is staying on the ball. Staying on the ball is so underrated. When someone is in a depressive episode, they usually do not have the energy to research for hours what clinics, what hospitals, what treatments, what therapists are available in the area and how they can get access to that. And also calling again when they don't call you back. Or, for example, calling several times, like with clinics, it's always known that it's a good thing to do so they don't forget about you. And also, so in case someone drops out of a program, let's say, that you can jump in and don't have to wait another year or another 6 months to get a space there, or even another month can be very difficult when you do need help. And you do need certain kind of treatment, especially like with specialized things like eating disorder treatment, can be so difficult and can be so devastating not having access to when you need it. Staying on the ball, by that I also mean bugging clinicians, also speaking up for yourself, also not letting people in general hospitals that are not mental health professionals, or even some mental health professionals in the NHS, not some, many, that I came across, try to just discount, invalidate your experience and not take you seriously. So staying on the ball and standing up for yourself, or having someone that is an advocate for you and that does it well, is essential, sadly, to get the appropriate help that people need. From my experience, often I'm just not listened to or not taken seriously in those regards, especially as someone who presents in a certain way, who is, not always, but often wearing a mask, wearing a smile on her face, talking in a certain way, how it is appropriate to talk to someone in this or that setting. Like even how I talk now, I usually talk like that sometimes on rants that I'm holding to my girlfriend about the systems in terms of mental health care. But honestly, I am not always like that. And sometimes it's even hard for me to even go somewhere and show how I actually feel. Like, it's very difficult for me, actually. I hardly know how to unmask in public as soon as I'm not in my four walls alone with my dog. That's how much I've been doing it. Staying on the ball and making sure that you are heard and that you go back and that you tell them again and again and that you do not have to do very dangerous things to yourself before you get help. That's something I wish that it was normal in this world today. Now I introduced all the problems to you. What is the solution? To word it in the most simple terms, in order to avoid misdiagnosis and make sure you get the right one, is by pursuing specialists, by opening a GoFundMe, write a good story to make sure you can get the funding, collect donations, research a lot on the internet, how you can find loopholes in the system, that you can get your assessment with a specialist sooner. I'm talking about specialists because things like ADHD, eating disorders, and also autism are often misdiagnosed and are very often just missed. It requires a lot of drive to get there. But when you have that drive, please use it. As soon as you research, immediately write an SMS, an email, call the clinician, the institute, or whatever. Otherwise, you're reading so many things and then you, at the end of the research, you still don't know who to call. Sometimes I write myself lists and then call through the list. I also had to do that recently, which I'm gonna elaborate in another video. Second tip is not giving up. Not giving up. Having also someone, a supporter, a friend, a family member, a coping skill that you like to use where you remind yourself of that you're worth it, that you're worth getting help, that you deserve to get help, that you also don't neglect yourself in that way. Chances are, when you have been suffering for a while, that you got used to a certain standard of living, but it's a very low standard. It's a very detrimental standard also most of the time. And when you're tired of it, that moment where you're like, I can't do this anymore, I am so sick and tired of it, I don't want to do this anymore. Use that energy, please. Use that energy and try to remind yourself, okay, I'm not giving up. I'm pursuing someone now. I'm calling this person again. I'm calling the clinic for the 5th time asking, hey, how long are the waiting times now? Yeah, this is my name. Yeah, I'm still waiting. My situation got worse. You know, all those things. Please, because with getting help for mental health care, we as individuals are knocked back by the system a lot of the time, like a lot of the time, which is often not the case with things like physical ailments, because those things are easier for clinicians to figure out and test for and physically see things in your blood, in your brain, whatever it is. That's why they take it more seriously. The mental is just as important. Taking care of your mental health now can also save the system, in reality, a lot of costs for medical health care if they want to see it from an economics point of view, which I find messy, but yeah, that's what they care about, right? Capitalism. So basically, I think it's very important that the system helps out its citizens earlier than later. Now, not later. Because so many costs that people of physical ailments that people with mental illness and mental health conditions, or people who are neurodivergent with chronic pain, with chronic illness, develop over time and which get worse, can be prevented or stopped or learned to manage better or dimmed down a bit when you take care of people's mental health in time, when they ask you, before they ask you. It starts already, like in my opinion, it starts already in kindergarten. It starts at home and in kindergarten and in school and everything in between and after that as well. But if we were to learn children in this day and age how to regulate our emotions, I think we would be at a different point by now as a society, as humans on this planet. The third and final tip for today that I am giving you, the conclusion, is education, educating yourself, educating others in your environment, talking to a therapist, getting someone, getting clinicians who you trust. That is also very important. And even if you don't fully trust them, have the feeling, or have someone in your family or surroundings that has the feeling this person knows what they're talking about. They know the subject. They're not guessing, they're not just writing anything, they're not just trying to get you out of the office as quickly as possible. They know what they're talking about. And for me, educating myself on, for example, things like my neurodivergency, ADHD, and different types of medication there are, different types of how to go about the assessment process, different loopholes I found in the system, even in the UK, has been so essential. And continuing therapy, educating yourself and continuing therapy, that's the last point I want to underline, is essential in order to get the right diagnosis and therefore get the accurate help that you need. And therefore, I often feel like also give yourself and your surroundings, your close people around you, an understanding and awareness of what you're going through and why you're behaving, how you're behaving, and how it's affecting you and therefore them, and how everyone can manage the situation better. Thank you for today. See you in the next video.